Today we're going to take a look at a build of Kruphix God of Horizons. Now Kruphix is a legendary enchantment creature god. It costs blue, green, and 3 generic to cast. It is indestructible as long as your devotion to green and blue is less than 7. Kruphix is not a creature. You have no maximum hand size, and if you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes colorless instead. So first, Kruphix will be a creature on the stack. So it can be countered by anything that counters a creature, but if it resolves and you do not have 7 pips of blue and or green, Kruphix then, when it resolves, is an enchantment, and then it's really hard to get rid of an indestructible enchantment. Now the goal of our deck is to keep Kruphix as an enchantment because it's hard to get rid of, and we're going to be building up mana. So the unspent mana piece, you want to make sure that on the end step before your turn, any mana that you have available, you tap it so that it becomes floating mana, and then it dumps into the Kruphix pool, so that slowly you build up mana and are able to play big spells and do things on your turn. We run 2 planeswalkers in the deck. We run Ugin the Ineffable for 6 generic mana. Colorless spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. This is going to be really important for our deck. It has a +1 that you exile a top card of your library face down, you look at it, and then it is a 2/2 colorless spirit token. When it leaves the battlefield, you put that exiled card in your hand, so it's good because we can get it back later. It's a good chump block for us, or even an attacker. And we can -3 to destroy target permanent that's 1 or more colors. We also run Ugin the Spirit Dragon for 8 generic. Ugin's +2 deals 3 damage to any target, -X exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less that's 1 or more colors. So most of the time this is going to hurt our opponents and not really hurt us at all. If we exile up to 4, that's going to hit generally a lot of things on our opponent's field, and ours not so much. And then it's -10, you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, put up to 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. If we get there, that is very backbreaking for the game, but generally Ugin is not here for that. Ugin's going to come down and we're going to immediately essentially board wipe with the -X. We do run 20 creatures. We're running Thassa's Oracle. We don't really have a way of tutoring it too much, but we do have a fair way of playing it that we will talk about in a moment. We run Liberator Urza Battlethopter because it has flash flying, and then we may cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash, which is going to be important as we're building up that Kruphix mana. Then on our end step or in response to something, we can flash in a big old nasty Eldrazi. And then whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to that cast spell is greater than the power, we put a +1/+1 counter on the Liberator. We do run Reclamation Sage, it's just good removal for us. Leveler is part of the combo for Thassa's Oracle. It has 5 generic to cast, and when Leveler comes into play, remove our library from the game. So ideally, we're going to play Leveler first, remove our library, play Thassa's Oracle, and then with Thassa's Oracle trigger, you win the game. And there's another combo piece that is involved in pulling out these 2 creatures out of our deck and winning, which we'll talk about when we get to our enchantments. Reality Smasher costs a colorless and 4 generic. It has trample and haste, and when it becomes a target of a spell an opponent controls, they have to discard a card. So essentially it has ward with the cost of them discarding. Seedborn Muse allows us to untap all of our permanents during each other player's untap step, so we can build up lots of mana. Consecrated Sphinx is some great card draw for us since we have no maximum hand size because of Kruphix. We want to be able to play things and have a good grip of cards at all times, and Consecrated Sphinx helps us with that. Endbringer costs a colorless and 5 generic. We untap it during each untap step, and then we can do several things. We can tap it and deal 1 damage to any target. We can pay a colorless, tap it, and then target creature can't attack or block, or we can pay 2 colorless and draw a card. So depending on where we're at in the game, Endbringer is very versatile for us, and then of course it is a 5/5. Oblivion Sower costs 6 generic to cast. When it is cast, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of his or her library, and then we may play any number of lands from that onto the battlefield under our control. Bane of Balaged costs 7 generic. When it attacks, defending player exiles 2 permanents he or she controls, so essentially it's Annihilator 2. Nezahal is great for us because it's some card draw. For 2 blue and 5 generic, Can't be countered. We have no maximum hand size, which generally speaking is not relevant because of our commander. And then we can discard 3 cards, exile them as a haul, return to the battlefield, tapped at the beginning of the next end step. World Breaker is a piece of removal for us. It costs a green and 6 generic. Whenever we cast the World Breaker, we exile a target artifact, enchantment, or land. And then it does have reach, and we can pay a colorless and 2 generic and sacrifice a land to bring World Breaker from our graveyard back to our hand. We run Artisan of Kozilek for 9 generic mana. When we cast a spell, we return a target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. And then it has Annihilator 2, and it is a 10-9. So it's going to pack quite a punch. We have Void Winnower for 9 generic. Your opponents can't cast spells with converted mana cost that is even, and 0 is even. Your opponents can't block with creatures with converted mana cost, and it's an 11-9. So no more even for your opponents. Jin-Gitaxi's Core Augur for 2 blue and 8 generic has Flash, which is great. We build up some mana with Kruphix, and when we flash this bad boy in, at the beginning of our end step, we draw 7 cards, and then each opponent's hand size is reduced by 7. So eventually it's going to get to the point where likely our opponents have no cards in hand, or Jin-Gitaxis is going to eat removal, which is good because we want that removal out of our opponent's hand so that we can play something even nastier. Kozilek Butcher of Truth for 10 generic is here. When we cast this spell, we're going to draw 4 cards. It has Annihilator 4, and when it's put into a graveyard, we shuffle it back into our library. Kozilek the Great Distortion is here for 2 colorless and 8 generic. When we cast it, if we have fewer than 7 cards in our hand, we draw cards equal to the difference. It has Menace, and we can discard a card with converted mana cost X, and when we do, then we can counter target spell with converted mana cost X. So if we discard a converted mana cost 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, we can counter a spell for that same amount. Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger for 10 generic is here. When we cast it, we're going to exile 2 permanents. It's indestructible. And when it attacks defending player, exiles the top 20 cards of his or her library. We also run Ulamog the Infinite Gyre for 11 generic mana. When we cast a spell, we destroy a target permanent. It's indestructible. It has Annihilator 4, and when it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, we shuffle it back in. Then, of course, we're gonna run Blightsteel Colossus for 12 generic. It has Trample, Infect, and Indestructible. 1 shot from Blightsteel Colossus, and an opponent is knocked out to Infect. It takes 10 Infect to kill someone. If they don't have a blocker, or they only have 1 damage of worth to block, 10 tramples through, they die. And then if it's put into our graveyard from anywhere, we're going to shuffle it back into our library. Kind of nasty, kind of hard to get rid of. We do run 7 sorceries in the deck. Finale of Devastation helps us tutor up something. We can tutor up the Blightsteel Colossus. Finale of Revelation, draw some cards. Sylvan Scrying gets a land, any land that we need. Fabricate to tutor up a key artifact, which we'll talk about. Triumph of the Horde is a potential win con for us, or at least a way to knock out a player when we give our creatures +1/+1 trample and infect. All is Dust is a good board wipe that is going to hurt our opponents more likely than it is going to hurt us, because they are going to sacrifice all colored permanents. Now it is important to remember lands are not anything. They produce a color, but they are not colored, so this is not going to blow up people's lands, and it is usually not going to blow up their artifacts, but it is going to get rid of their creatures. Tooth and Nail is one way that we can go get the Leveler Thassa's Oracle combo. If we pay the Entwine cost of 2 plus the original spells cost of 7, we can choose both modes where we can search for up to 2 creature cards from our library and reveal them, and then put 2 creature cards into play. We would put in Leveler and Thassa's Oracle, stack the triggers so that Leveler triggers first. We remove our library, Thassa's Oracle triggered, we win the game. We run Interaction, of course. We run Counter Spells. We run Tutors. We run ways of removing things like with Pongify and Nature's Claim. Blue Sun Zenith to draw some cards. Capsize is kind of mean if we have the mana to pay the buyback cost, because we can start returning things to our owner's hands, and we can return lands if we really need to. So this can eventually, if we get enough mana and we're playing things with our Seedborn Muse and we're tapping and untapping and drawing cards and doing lots of things, Capsize can win us the game essentially, because we just bounce everything our opponents have. Drown in Dreams is either good for us or bad for our opponents. We can choose to draw cards if we want, but more importantly, we can have a target player mill twice X cards, and with the amount of mana that we're building up, we can pay 10, 15 mana into this, and then they have to mill that many cards. They could be milling 30 cards or half their deck, depending on how much mana we dump into this. And then you can target the same player with the draw, so you can make them mill 30 and then draw another 15, and most of their deck is now gone, and they're going to have to discard, and it's going to be a way that you can slowly knock out a player. It's a fun little card for us, or we can use it for ourselves. We do run 14 artifacts. We run Expedition Map to grab a land that we need. We run things like Skyclave Relic to make lots of mana. Victory Chimes is a nice political tool that you don't see played very often. It untaps during each player's untap step, and we can tap it to add a colorless mana and give it to any player. We can give it to ourselves, so by the time it makes it back to us, we've generated 3 colors. Or if someone else needs that extra color so they can cast a spell, we can tap it and give that mana to them and bargain with them. We do run Veldecan Ori because why not? Forsaken Monument gives our colorless creatures +2/+2 as if our Eldrazi's need to be bigger. And whenever we tap a permanent for colors, we add an additional colorless. Whenever we cast a colorless spell, we gain 2 life, which is important because in the early stages of the game, we aren't going to have very many blockers as we're building up mana. And then all of a sudden, we just start dumping big boys on the field. So we are going to get attacked for a while as people are afraid of Eldrazi's. Planar Bridge, when we got lots of mana, is going to allow us to pay 8 and search for any permanent card and put it on the battlefield. Usually we're grabbing some big old nasty things. And once this starts going off, it is not long before we end up winning the game because we could grab things like Omniscience and then just start casting things for free. And at that point, it shouldn't be very difficult for us to close it out when we've got mana to be able to do this. Chromatic Ori allows us to spend mana though it was any color, which is good. It taps for 5, and we can pay 5 and draw cards for among the different colors of permanents, which would only be 2. Colorless is not a color, so it doesn't matter if we have Eldrazi's or not. We would be able to only draw for green and blue. We do run 3 enchantments. We're running Rhystic Study, of course, so we have lots of cards to draw. Leyline, so we can flash things in, so we're building up mana and then just dumping stuff on people's end steps and then being able to attack and do things. Omniscience, because it allows us to dump everything we have drawn. We have 35 lands in the deck. We run things like Besage You, of course, because it's removal or land. Cavern of Souls is generally going to name Eldrazi, making our Eldrazi's uncountable. We run other lands that you wouldn't necessarily see, like Eldrazi Temple, because this is going to allow us to tap it for 2 mana if we're casting an Eldrazi spell. We run Otawara as a land or piece of removal. Seagate Wreckage is some card draw for us if we have no cards in hand. So if we do get to a point that we have no cards, we can at least draw 1 card and slowly rebuild and get back into this game. Shrine of the Forsaken Gods either taps for 1 or 2 colors, and then if we're paying to tap it for 2 colors, we can spend this on a colorless spell, but we can only activate it if we control 7 or more lands. You'll see Temple of the False Gods, taps for 2, activate only if we control 5 or more lands. These are lands you would not normally see in decks, but because we want to generate big mana, we want to be able to float as much mana into Kruphix as we can, which is also why we are running the Urza's lands, Urza's Mines, Urza Power Plant, and Urza's Tower. If we can manage to assemble all 3, hang on to your butts because we're going to start going nuts. We also run Urza's Workshop, which is a newer land from Brothers War, and it has Metalcraft. We tap it for each and add a colorless for each Urza land we control. We only can do this if we have 3 or more artifacts. So if we do control an Urza's Tower, Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, Urza's Workshop, and if we get lucky and happen to have the Urza Saga on the field, we can be tapping this for 4 mana, which is great. If you've played against the Kruphix deck and you have other suggestions for cards that we should think about in our deck, or you just have some experience playing it, let us know in the comments below. We would love to hear some feedback and how the deck has gone for you, as well as what it's like playing on the other side of the table against this big old nasty deck of big old fatties. Share that in the comments below.